Hello again. Sorry for the poor lighting. I'm actually dressed for this one. Not that that really matters at all. I don't have a talking point, but I figured that I needed to push through my own insecurities and just make a video anyway. Because I figured the more I do it, the easier it's going to get. And that's the only logic that I'm operating under. Because I keep asking myself, what else? What else am I supposed to do? What else can I do? Because if I go over, the state, the predicament that I'm in, more or less, what story that I'm living right now, you know, it's not a good way of putting it. So, there's a lot of people online, and they're making manifestation videos, and that's their whole shtick, They're just like, oh, real life is just a simulation. It's just a dream simulation, and you can be whatever character you want to be. You can be anything that you want to be. And I personally resist the concept of this because there's so much in the world that's happening that is completely out of your control. So, it's just like if you were in a dream, why are you dreaming this? Why am I dreaming this? Why am I this 29-year-old loser who doesn't have any sort of destiny, doesn't have any sort of anything, But then it's just like, why do you want to be important too? And it's just like, doesn't everybody want to be important? Everybody wants to be special, But then again, not everybody can be special, And I'm not trying to be cruel when I say that, It's just statistically, there's a lot of people that are more or less the same. Like, there's an average, and and this is why it's not so good to just like group things together, at the same time. But at the same time, if just like 50 guys get the same haircut, that's pretty much an average haircut, it doesn't look special. And just like, oh, it looks special because it's on me. Well, no, you just look like a preset number 4, Speaking of which, you know, for years, I've been trying to grow out my hair, right? Because I want to look like a Lord of the Rings character. I want to look like a Jedi character. Some sort of, I don't know, spellcaster or something like that, I always thought the concept of, like, braiding hair was pretty cool, And I didn't want to do, like, these quote-unquote girly type hairstyles, but, just, like, some of the cool, like, I don't know, like, maybe, what do they have? Like, definitely not like they have in, like, China, with, where they're, I don't even know what they do in China, where they have the long braid, except, the top of your skull is, like, completely shaven. I don't want that, you know, but, that's their thing, and I can't shit on other people for having different ideas than me, um, I mean, what's good is everybody has different ideas, and that's why, some people like ketchup on a hot dog, and some people like mustard, and some like relish, and some like onions, and so on and so forth, And, I always stress, and it's just like, why do you stress? I always stress about the fact that, like, we have huge debates over whether pineapple should be on a pizza. Like, people get mad. They go on the internet and just like, you can't have pineapple on a pizza. And just like, well, I can't say that their entire personality becomes, you can't have pineapple on a pizza. Just like, why do you care that much? You know? Just like, as a passing comment, just like, okay, you don't like pineapple on a pizza, then just don't order it, you know? But the same can be said, like, I don't like people that poach animals and they kill them for their fur, you know? But to them, the people that poach and do it, it's their cultural thing, and that's why there've been like, they've been like, what would they call them? not just poachers, but fur farmers. I think it's disgusting and grotesque, but people, skinners, like, they've been fur trappers, they've always been around, even from historical times, People are just like, oh, this big grizzly has a great coat, so I'm going to kill it and turn it into a grizzly bear coat, you know? And just like, well, I think it's messed up, You killed the grizzly bear so you could wear its skin, you know? But I feel like for the most part, I try to operate under some sort of principle that all life is sacred and do, and the golden rule, do unto others what you would do unto them, unto you. Treat others the way you want to be treated, right? And I try to live by that. I wouldn't want someone to kill me and then take my skin and wear it, you know? That would be grotesque. Just like, who would want to wear my face, you know? But, but the point being is, a lot of people have different ideas than me, We all have different ideas from each other, and sometimes those differences make the world a better place, because we have new ideas, new ways of doing things, there's breakthroughs in technology and, science and culture and stuff like that. But then sometimes we have like these, what I would think, like, bad ideas, It's just like someone's culture is that they go to the local square and they watch chickens kill each other and they attach razor blades to them and then they bet on it, And I think that's evil, Like, who would want to watch something like that? But then again, we do have like UFC and like MMA boxing and stuff, but that's like different, Because, it's, well, first of all, it's not a fight to the death, Does it get messed up? Sure, but it's also about the sport of it. And it's just like, is it like, a very aggressive sport? Sure. But, it's kind of different because there's, how can it be different? Because there's like technique and skill involved and, like, fighting, in my opinion, is kind of like dancing. It's how two people measure up to one another, I think it's an art form. Same with like, sword fighting and kung fu movies and stuff like that, We all, well, a lot of us like to see it, Like, I know I keep going off tangents and I just like don't make any sort of sense or anything like that. But like, I always wanted to, well, get into sword play, I guess. I wanted to learn how to fight with a sword. And, so I have like a couple of swords around because, I'm a basic ass white guy. And, I have swords. I don't have a katana. I don't have a katana that sits in its sheath upside down on a mantle somewhere and never gets touched, because I don't like the concept of owning something that you don't use. I thought that was silly. I thought it was silly that people buy couches and they put plastic on it and they never sit on the couches. Just like, why? I don't like people that buy shoes that are so nice they can't wear them, and they can only wear them in their bedroom. I knew a guy, they were all about, back at work when I had a job, they would always be talking about, hey, did you buy them Yeezys? Which I guess is a shoe brand. I don't know anything about it. I never understood it, And just, like, the people, when, like, the PS5 came out, you had all these, like, either rich people or just people that had like I don't know. I have to assume that it was like more wealthy people, right? And their whole business entrepreneurship program they would buy the PlayStations as soon as they could, as soon as it was available, and they bought them out of stock. And they would resell them for a higher price to other people after the fact. And it's just like, that is so messed up, you know? Like, I don't know how much a PS5 was, wholesale. Like, I don't know how much a PS5 cost to make. I don't know how much they were selling it for. None of these numbers ever actually make any sense to me. You know, like I heard that, in China they make iPhones for $5, and then they bring them to the United States and they sell them for like $2,000. And it's just like ridiculous. So I don't know how much a PS5 cost originally. I don't know how much they sold it for at the stores, what the markup retail value was. And then, you have people that buy it at market retail value, and then they upsell it another percentage chunk so they can make a profit off of second pre-owned, I don't even know at that point, PlayStations. And it's just like, that's messed up. So a lot of people that wanted PlayStations couldn't get it because, a bunch of other people bought it out of stock first. It was basically like the toilet paper epidemic that happened in the 2019, COVID. People just going to the store and just like, toilet paper, And it's just like bizarre. Why am I here? Retail value, markup, just like money doesn't make sense to me. I'm sorry, I lost my thread. I never really had one, coming into this unscripted. There's just like a lot to say, but it's all just meaningless words, one in front of the other, really, just padded, I don't know. I'm trying to figure out what I'm supposed to do with my life, right? Because I've been sitting around 7 months unemployed, and lately how I've been spending my days is I go out, I wake up in the afternoon, and lately, my phone recently broke, but I'm using the tablet, and I'll go over to Dunkin' Donuts around the corner. And I will get onto the Wi-Fi, and typically what I've been doing is I've been like going onto YouTube, and I've been skimming the headlines, trying to figure out what's going on in the world. And there's a lot of talk about the whole Trump and Epstein scandal, and just like, well, obviously Epstein didn't kill himself, it was an inside job, and just like, but now they're trying to figure that out, and just like 2 seconds, just like, obviously, just think about the plot, and think about things if it was a story, dead men tell no tales. But obviously I can't definitively say this, I wasn't there. And just like other stuff like that. And there's, in my personal feed, I had mentioned like manifestation and stuff like that. There's a lot of manifestation videos. I don't really watch them. I looked into a few, but I can't get on board that gravy train because it just doesn't work for, the way that I view things. But I can't knock it either. It sounds like bullshit, but I can't just... Who's the judge of these things, I mean, personally, I grew up a religious person, right? I grew up in the Mormon doctrine, whatever. And it's pretty much the same as like every other religion, to be honest with you. There's probably nuanced differences, but who cares? They claim to have, the second chapter of, the Bible, right? The Bible had some missing documents to it, and just like this guy named Joseph Smith found them and translated them. And there's a lot of like theory about that and how he was just like a fraud and he was just like setting up a church and just like everybody what they're doing now, you know? Like I don't believe in churches, you know. I don't. I think that they're probably good for some people, you know, to instill morals and stuff like that. You know, church communities are to an extent good. I mean, like I'm at this weird stage in my own development where I don't know if I would recommend anybody going to church, you know? I don't know, it's hard to think for yourself. Like, I've got the idea, what if, what if society didn't exist, right? And it's just like, what conclusions would you come to on your own? You know, would you come to the conclusion that there's some guy in the sky that made the entire world, you know? Would you think that? Probably not, you know? You probably wouldn't think about that at all, to be honest with you, you know? But I have a tendency to do this, I'm sorry. Like, I've, I think overall, church is pretty fraudulent. Now you have all these people that say that they talk to God, they speak to God, God speaks through them, you know? And it's just like, okay, not even okay, what is he saying, you know? Just like, I think that's bullshit, because God wouldn't just talk to the people on the top. He wouldn't talk to the people that are just rich and wealthy and have the most resources, you know? God would speak to anybody at any point, I think. You know, everybody is important, you know? Even though I keep saying that not everybody can be important, everybody is important, you know? Everybody has a role to fill, everybody has a destiny, you know? And perhaps, you know, some of those destinies are more glamorous than others. You know, like I said in an earlier video, you know, someone has to make the sandwiches at the Subway shop, you know, and that, you know, although it's a pitiful existence, you know, somebody's got to do it and it's an important job. Otherwise, nobody's going to get those sandwiches, you know? And, I mean, wouldn't I want the best sandwich person in the land to, like, be making sandwiches, you know? I like a good sandwich. But, and there's, like, nothing wrong with being a sandwich maker or working in a bakery shop or something like that, you know? Anyway, perhaps it's my own stigma when it comes to these things because, you know, somebody needs to be a cash register, cash register? It can't be a cash register. A cashier. A cashier at at a supermarket or something. You know, somebody's got to stock the shelves at these places. I mean, do they? I mean, I don't know. Because it's just like trying to imagine a world where people didn't have to do things that they didn't want to do, right? And I can't picture this. You know, I tried so hard, you know, but somebody's got to do the work that nobody else wants to do for society to continue to exist, you know, because am I saying that this is just the way it is and this is the best that we can do and that's it? You know, just give up, just get with the program, you know. I mean, before I had like ideas that, you know, like we build machines to make work easier. We build machines and robots to do the work that nobody else wants to do, right? To do things that are unsafe or dangerous or require high calculations or a lot of skill that is hard for humans to do, you know? Once you can build a factory to mass produce like cupcakes or something like that, well, honestly, then all the magic of cupcake goes away now, doesn't it? Then you just have a store-bought a cupcake and, you know, the love isn't there, and it just tastes different, doesn't it? Or is that just me? You know, I don't know. And that's why people go to like different pastry shops and stuff like that, you know? I don't know. I'm just like factories mass producing stuff. Somebody's got to work in the factories, you know? Somebody's got to make textile. But the thing is, you know, I mean, everybody should be able to, because I don't think it's about the job per se. Because, you know, like you take away all the jobs, just like hypothetically, you know, I was thinking that if androids and robots and AI took over all the jobs, then people would be freed up to go pursue the things that they actually wanted to pursue, you know? And I don't know what kinds of things other people would like to pursue. Now, a lot of people, they just want to get drunk on a beach somewhere. And, well, I feel like you get drunk enough on a beach too many times and you've had enough and you want to do something else. You know, some people they want to travel the world. You know, they want to go to Italy, they want to go to France, they want to go to Egypt, they want to go to Africa. And, you know, I mean, my standpoint is just like here, there, it doesn't really make a difference. You know, just like, oh, you see these new places, it's just like, that's cool and all. But, I mean, maybe it's a me problem, just like, where's the story? You know? I mean, I'm angry at myself because I'm not making any points and I'm just talking in circles. I just say, oh, you know, everybody doesn't need jobs. And it's just like, oh, but everybody needs to actually work, though. I'm trying to imagine a world that's different, and it's very hard to do because this is what I've been known to. But an idea that I keep resurfacing on is, you know, like I said, you know, I was a religious person, and I don't think that God speaks to me personally. You know, I more or less feel abandoned, but one of the ideas that I have is humans are supposed to make heaven on earth, right? Which is a really strong whatever. But, you know, because, like, heaven occurs in a different dimension, right? It occurs on this energy network where you don't have a physical body anymore. You know, you don't feel pain. You don't feel joy the same way because you can't feel sadness, therefore you can't feel joy, you know? So everything is just on an energetic level, and it doesn't matter. You just become like a series of electrons or whatever, you know? And, you know, so you're just like peaceful and apathetic because nothing matters anymore because, you know, that's what heaven is, right? I guess, if that makes any sense. You know, and we come to Earth to, you know, I understand I'm far-fetching here, across the aisle, but we come to Earth to experience stories, you know? Like, the hardships are important because they make a good story, you know? Like, if you were perfect at everything and amazing at everything, wouldn't that be boring? Just to be, like, amazing at everything all the time? You know, just like, if there wasn't a ladder to climb, then, you know, it's a hill to get on top of or a mountain, you know. If there was no personal goal for you, then why do any of it? Or maybe this is just how I'm wired, and I'm just like, you know, projecting myself, which is always a dangerous thing, you know. But, you know, like, even death is, like, important because without loss, how would you know what you've lost if things were permanent forever, you know? And change is also important, and I recognize this, you know? Character development, you know, learning lessons, you know, becoming wiser, becoming, you know, more emotionally mature, becoming more, you know, But, so humans were come to Earth onto the physical plane, right? Not just humans, but animals and creatures and everything, you know. And we come here to try to realize the best possible version that could exist, right? Because it is a matrix, you know? Like, I guess, more or less, I've got the concept that if everything started with a Big Bang, right? And that's what some people believed, there was just something in space and it blew up and, the universe was born, And I think that the original source material is what constituted God, And God blew up, essentially, and made the universe and made life, and here we are. And all humans, all creatures, all life is a derivative of God, all humans hold the flame that God is, and it's a collective, and different people are in different cycles and at different soul ages or whatever, Some people have made me believe that I'm just like an older soul, Some people believe in reincarnation and, past life regression and stuff like that, and people, live out multiple lifetimes as, both genders and, different animals and stuff like that, and it exists on and on because matter cannot be created nor destroyed, it can only be moved from one state to another state, and so that's what they say in physics or whatever. To but nobody who's not even college educated, so I wouldn't take anything about what I say. It's all with a grain of salt, really. But the idea is that we're supposed to make the best version here on Earth. And here we are in the year 2025, and this is what we've achieved so far, And personally, I think it's a stinking pile of shit, and we should all be disappointed in ourselves, because if we are, remnants of God, and this is what we're doing, and, nobody cares, and we could be doing a whole lot better. It's just like, because the other idea is just like, we're here on Earth to try to, that fire that I told you about, we are like a candle lit from, God, who is the torch, right? The source, and I don't think it's a he or a him, and I don't think it's some guy who sits on the throne, I think it's probably incomprehensible, because, listen, he's got to keep space-time together, and I know that I use him interchangeably, but, sorry, old dichotomies and whatever. But he's got to keep the entire universe going, because, how the quarks work, on the subatomic level, and just like, I mean, I can't fathom to, say that I understand anything at all. All I do know is that I will have multiple prayers to God, and I just feel like I'm leaving a voicemail to someone that doesn't answer, Although someone, Neville Goddard, this old timer, had convinced me that, God is within you. So looking for God elsewhere, outside of you, you're looking for him in the wrong place, So listen deep inside you, and what do you think that, God is saying? And, well, it's hard, because some people, you got people like Trump, people think that he's speaking for God, and it's just like, I mean, I personally don't think God would agree with you. Anyway, that's it for this video. I'll catch you in the next one.